Okay, welcome guys to lecture 5 of Python. My name is Pranav. I'll be your lecturer for today. So, if you guys have any questions while the lecture is going on or during any time, feel free to ask in PyQuestions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Okay, so we'll start the lecture by going off with last week's homework. So, your homework was this. Let me just copy it. Okay, so you have to generate a random number from 1 to 15, and the user gets 5 tries to guess the number. And if the user's guess is like 3 integers away or less, you had to print the guesses very close. And for each time you have to say that you have 2 more tries left, you have 1 more try left. Then the user wins if he guesses the number and within 5 tries, or otherwise he loses. Okay, so first thing is to generate a random number from 1 to 15. So the first thing that we would probably do is to import the random module, and we would generate a number, say randomly from 1 to 15. So the random.random function, as you might recall, returns a number which is from 1 to 15. Any number from 1 to 15 randomly it will return. So we did the first part of it. So the user gets 5 tries. So probably what we can do is have a loop which loops over 5 times. We'll do it in reverse because it's easier to print the number of tries that the user has. So for example, if it's you have 4 tries remaining, we could just say, print you have I minus 1 tries remaining. So that would say you have 4 more tries remaining. So it makes it easier while we loop it in reverse. So that's why we're looping it in reverse. So first we print the remaining tries. Okay, and remaining tries would be I here. First time you get 5, and as it decreases, the remaining tries would reduce. Okay, let's next take in the guess of the user as an integer. So we say enter your guess. So the guess would be stored in the variable called guess. So a simple condition to check if the user has won. If the guess equals the number, we say you win. And as soon as the user has won, we would obviously want to break out of the loop. We don't want the loop running again, so we type in break. If not, if the user has not guessed the number, we would probably say, we'll go back. But we have another condition, which is if the user's guess is 3 integers or away from the number or less away from the number, we have to print your guesses very close. So how would we do this? A simple way that we would do this is check, if the guess is in the range of the number minus 3 and the number plus 3. So essentially what is this is, let's say the number happens to be 15. The random number happens to be 10 in this case. Okay. So the number minus 13 would be 7, and the number plus 13 would be plus 3, sorry, the number minus 7 would be the 10 minus 3 would be 7, and 10 plus 3 would be 13. So anyway, this is the range. So if the user's guess happens to be in this range, obviously the user is just 3 integers away from the number. So we would say your guess is very close. So that's why we're using in range here. There's also another condition that we probably might want to check, but I'll leave it for later. I'll show you why we want to do that later. So if that is in the case, we print saying your guess is very close. And if not, let's just if it happens to be the last guess, which is 1, so 1 would be the last try that he had, and the user manages to get it wrong, we're just going to say you lost. the number was so to let the user know the number was so and so. So first we randomly initialize the number. This for loops 5 times. We print the number of tries. We get the guess from the user. If the guess equals the number, the user wins and we break out of the loop. If not, we check whether it's in the range of 3 close to the number. If so, we print it's close. And if it's the last try and it happens to be not equal to the number, we're just gonna say you lost and the number was so and so. So there's one small bug with the program. I'll just show you what it is. Okay, I managed to get it the first. Okay, let's try. Okay, it's probably very close, so we'll just try 15 just so that we lose. Okay, my bad. Let's try 15, 14, 1, 2. Okay, it says I lost. So the issue with this is we also want to have the condition which is I is greater than 1. So if my guess happens to be close, we don't want to display my guess is close at the last moment. To maybe better illustrate this, you know what? I'm just going to run. I'm going to initialize this to 13. Okay. Okay, that is an issue. Give me a minute. I'm sorry guys, there's an issue with Jupyter Notebooks. Give me a minute. Okay. So since it's 15 and I try to get very close with it, even in the, okay, let's say I print 12 again. It's going to say my guess is very close instead of saying that I lost. So that's why we would probably add this condition which is and I is greater than 1. So during the last try, we do not want the program to say your guess is very close, rather say that you lost. So that's why we're probably adding this condition. So even if I come very close to it, it's going to say I lost rather than say I was very close. So that's why we'll probably use this condition here. Okay, so that's it for last week's homework. So we now move on to this week's lecture now. Okay. So let's start with something called as, I'm sorry, it's a markdown here, the Unicode. For those of you who don't know, the Unicode is a standard which sets, it's a standard which sets a unique number to a specific alphabet, number, or any special character in all devices. So me typing G has a specific Unicode, I has a specific Unicode, 2 has a specific Unicode. So to illustrate it much better, the small letter A or A in lowercase has been assigned to the Unicode number of 97. So that if you print this Unicode number 97 in your phone, in your laptop, or any electronic device, it would probably print A. So this Unicode standard is to set a common standard across all devices, whether you have a different brand of phone or different brand of laptop. You would probably 97 in Unicode would mean A everywhere. So to keep it universal, we have this code called Unicode. So if you don't believe me, let's just try it out ourselves. So we use a function called the Ord function. So the Ord function, essentially what it does is it returns the Unicode value of whatever I type in. So let's take a type in X, it returns the Unicode value of X. So Unicode value of A happens to be 97. Let's try it out with a few more. So the Unicode value of capital A is 65, and that would obviously mean plus 26 of it, plus A inclusive is plus 25, so the Unicode value of Z is 27. So all in between would be, let's say, B would be 66, C would be 67, and it would go on. And this, the lowercase letter A has the Unicode value of 97, and plus 25 would be Z, which would be 122. So it's not just letters, as I told. You have Unicode value for numbers as well and special characters. So let's probably try it. Even your $sign has a Unicode value. Not sure what it is. Let's check what's the Unicode value. So Unicode value of $sign is 36. So since it's universal, if you print it anywhere in every device, it would still say 36. And you have for almost every character. You have for let's try it out for asterisk. The Unicode value would be, I don't know, let's check, is 42. So here you go, you can see different Unicode values of different characters, numbers, and so on. Okay, so what if we want to do the reverse? Let's say I want to input 65 and I want to let it print small a. What would I do then? So Python has a handy program called the CHR program. A function called the CHR function, or the character function. So the character function essentially returns the character based on a Unicode value. It's just the opposite. So saying 65 would print in A, and as you can see 90 was capital Z, so if I put in 90 it's going to say Z, and $sign was 36, so if I print 36 it's going to say a $sign, and let's try it with an asterisk 42, so it would say asterisk. An interesting thing, this might seem a bit boring for you, so there's an interesting thing. It's not just special characters, numbers and letters which have their own Unicode. Emojis also have their predefined Unicode value. So let's try a few of them out. So the Unicode value of emoji is a bit complex. So to use the Unicode value of an emoji, you would start with a U, and let me just type in this. I think this is the Unicode value of a grinning face. Yeah. If you guys don't know what the Unicode value is, you can just type Unicode on the internet, and I'm probably sure you would get. You just say Unicode value for emojis. Just do this. You can see the Unicode value of an emoji. So instead of the plus, you must add 3 zeros instead of the plus. So let's say I want the upside down face. It's U plus F643. So let us try that here. So /U. Instead of plus, we use 000, and what is it? 1F643. Okay, so it's 1F643. Yep, that prints the reverse of it. So as you had noticed in the list also has certain names here. These are called the CLDR short names. The CLDR stands for Common Local Data Repository. That doesn't matter right now. So you don't actually have to type in the Unicode value. You could, that's a much simpler way. So what you do is you type in a huge /n instead of a small one. A small one essentially gives you a space. You type in a bigger one, and you type in the curly brackets. So let's see, the winking face. You just need to type winking face, and here you go, you have the winking face. And this one was probably called the grinning face, so let's try that one out. You would say /n, and inside quotes you would say grinning face. That returns a grinning face. And maybe let's try, I think there's an emoji which is called rolling on the floor laughing, or ROFL for short. Let's try that one out. Yep, you have the emoji for ROFL here. And I think this might be a bit cool if you want to implement emojis in your program. You could just use the Unicode or just type in the name. And I probably don't know what's the time for you guys. It's night for me. So to all those who are probably hungry, you could take a taco here. Yeah, here's a taco to all those who are hungry, a virtual one. Okay, so that's it for Unicode and cool functionality with Unicode using emojis and so on. Okay, so let's move into more on for loops. Let's continue with for loops from last week. So we're going to look at a concept called nested for loops this week. Don't worry, you can have plenty of practice for Unicode later. I'll give you tasks for for loops this week instead of Unicode because Unicode seems a bit easy. Okay. So a nested loop is nothing but a for loop inside loops. It's basically loops inside loops. That's basically what a nested loop is. As you can have if block inside another if block, and you can even go further and have another if block in that. You can go on forever. These are called nested ifs. A nested for loop is essentially a for loop inside a for loop. So to demonstrate how this works, let's do a simple program. So this would be the outer loop. Let me say I want to print from 1 to 4 here because 5 won't be printed. And let's have an inner loop which does the same thing, 1 to 5. So to differentiate, let me just print both the outer and inner. So outer is essentially the variable of the outer block, inner is essentially the variable of the inner block. And let me just print statement here to illustrate how this works. Okay. So the way it works is outer gets assigned 1, the value of 1, then we directly move into the inner block. So the inner block gets the value of 1, it gets the value of 2, 3, 4. So once this loop terminates, we move back to the first loop. So the first loop initially had the value of 1, now it's switched to 2. So now again the inner loop runs, the inner loop gets the value of 1, 2, 3, 4. Once the inner loop has been terminated, it goes back to the outer loop again, and the outer loop gets to the next variable. To put it in simple terms, you could say only after the inner loop has finished all iterations. Iteration is the term to say that it's finished running from 1 to 4 here in this case. The outer loop moves to the next iteration. So as you can see, only after the inner loop is finished printing till 4, the outer loop moves to the next, moves to 2. The same case here, only after it's print to 4, it moves to 3 and so on to 4. And this cycle continues, so this continues till all the iterations of the outer loop has been finished. Okay, so only after the outer loop is finished all the iterations, it's going to exit out to maybe say, I'll just print same. Okay, you can see only after it's finished all its iterations, it's going to exit here. So this print statement is to say once this loop has been finished, as you can see a space is being printed. The same, once that has been done, this runs. Once again it finishes, it runs. So once the inner loop has finished all the iterations, it moves to the outer loop. Then again it comes back to the inner. Once it finishes, move back to the outer loop. So only after the outer loop has finished all the iterations, the whole loop will exit. So that's how the nested for loops work. So let's, before giving you a task, let's look at a function called the end is equal to function. Don't worry, I'll give you a task to implement nested for loops so that you get a bit more familiar with it. So what is this thing here does? End is equal to so on. So you can type in anything here. So the end is equal to a or something. What it does, it makes sure the print statement prints in the same line ending with a. So as you can see, if I print something like hi here and let's say hello here, it's going to print in 2 different lines. And if I probably want to print them in same line, I would just do this. But it's a bit difficult. So what if I want to have 2 print statement printing in the same line? That's why we use the end is equal to a here. So let's try printing, if we do it in the normal way, let's try printing a 5 times here. You just do a. As you can see, it gets printed in different lines. Let's try doing with this with end equal to. So syntax for this is, you would say here, and at the end you would type in the command end is equal to, let's say I want to end it with a space. I want each sentence to have a space. So doing this would result in hey getting printed in the same line, and if you notice between each hey there's a space, and if I increase the space to say this long, it's gonna make sure that they are this long, So basically what this does is, once this print statement has been finished, whatever is in this gets printed. Then after that, if you print again, it's going to print hey here in the same line, and it's going to print this again. You can do this with even characters. So let's try it with a character instead of a space. Let's say I want to end it with dollar, saying this would essentially, just put in a space here, so it's much better. Okay, as you can see, once the hey has been finished, it prints a dollar, then again it goes back to the same line. So it always goes to the next line. Okay, I'm sorry, it only goes to the next line if you introduce a print statement without this command here. So until then, if I keep using the end command, it's going to keep on printing in the same line. So to illustrate that it goes to the next line only if I remove the end command. Let's do this. Let's say let's print a hash instead of a dollar sign here. Okay. So as you can see, this print statement does not contain the end command. So when I print this, each time it will be printed in a different line. So what happens is, this command hey gets printed. Once this is printed, the hash is printed. So obviously the next print statement has to remain in the same line. So it prints Bob in the same line, but as soon as it prints Bob, the program moves to the next line. So anything that gets printed in the next line. But instead, if I did this again, if I use the end command here, it's going to print hey Bob in the same line here. Or if I wanted to use a space, it's going to print the same thing, same line. So unless I use an end a print statement without this, it's never going to go to another line. If you keep on using end, it's keep on going to print in the same line, irrespective of how many other print statement you want. If you want the print to move to the next line, you have to have a print statement without the end command. So only if you have a print statement without an end command, it's going to move to the next line. So I hope this clears out how the end command works. The end command makes sure the print statement prints in the same line. Whatever you type in would be the end of the print statement, and after that it's still going to keep printing the same line. You could give space, or you could give any special characters or anything that you want to print inside these quotes. And another thing to remember would be, if you want to move to the next line, you have to have a print statement without the end command. Okay, so using the for loop and the end command, we'll have a simple task for you. So the task would mean I want you guys to use the nested for loops and the end command to print a table of asterisks. I'm sorry. So the tables number of rows and columns will be inputted by the user. Will be into the next line. So to give you a sample output, this would be the output I would want from you. I would want you to enter a number of columns, prompt for a number of rows. So let's say the user enters 5, and let's ask the user for the number of columns. 3. Okay, so in this case I would want your output to be a table with 3 columns of asterisks and 5 rows. Oh, I'm sorry. So this would probably be your output. So 3 columns, 5 rows, as you can notice. So based on the rows and columns, I want you to print a table of asterisks which relates to the rows and columns. Use the nested for loops to print and also the end command to make sure it gets printed in the same line. So you would probably need to use both the nested for loops and the end command to print in such a way. Okay, I'll give you guys like 10 minutes to solve this. If you guys have any doubt, you can probably ask it in 5 questions. That's actually right, but I want you to get the input for the rows and columns. So it's not hard coded to 5 and 3. I just so if you get the input, I think the program would be correct. Yeah. Cool. I'll walk you through the solution in a few minutes. Okay, I think that should be enough time for the solution, for the task. I mean, okay, let's go through the solution now. The first thing you would need to, in a variable, get the number of rows. That would be this, and simple as that is, and the same thing for column. Just, okay. Cool. So we'll take an input the number of rows and number of columns that the user wants us to print a table of asterisks. So the next thing we would do is, probably the first thing you would print is a column, a row rather than a column. You wouldn't want to print like this rather than going like first like this, I'm sorry, and then printing the next line would be tedious. And so the much easier thing would be to print a row first, then go to the next row and print the next row, and so on. So probably we'll start with the rows. So the first thing that we would probably do is loop through the rows. We'll say for I in range row. So what this does is it loops through each of the rows. So we'll have one row first, then it moves to the next row. Okay, so you could do this. If it's hard coded, probably what you would do is, print asterisks is like this. This is essentially, oh my god. Great. What's wrong with Jupyter today? So you could do this, but we've also asked the user to enter the number of columns. So we would want to print this based on the number of columns that the user has inputted. If it's 4, you probably want to print 4 asterisks rather than 3. So easier way to do this would be, you could also do this, multiplied with the number of column. I think this should also work. This also does work. So but even this is, I feel, a bit hard coded. So a much better solution would be to loop through each of the columns. So we would do this, and the simple thing that we would do is first print the asterisks, obviously. But if we do this, let's take 3 rows and 3 columns. You can see we do get the required number of rows and columns, but everything gets printed in a straight line. But we don't want that. We want the first 3 to get printed in one line, the next 3 in another line, the next 3 in another line. So that's where the end is equal to command comes in. So we would say end is equal to, and give it a space. So doing this, you would expect it to print in the same line, but this poses another problem here. What it does is it would print everything in the same line, but we essentially achieved printing all the asterisks in the same line, but you want only the first 3 to get printed in one line, the next 3 in the other line. So possibly what we can do is we would add a print statement here, a dummy print statement. So what this does is, when it prints to the columns, so if the column is 3, it would print 3 asterisks, and essentially we want the next asterisk to be printed in the next line. So we would just say print here. So what this does is, if I now give in 5 and 3, you can see that it prints in each line. So what we did was, we first looped through each row. So the first row will be printed. So once we loop through each row, we have 3 columns, so 3 asterisks will be printed in the same line using the end is equal to command. Once the 3 asterisks have been printed, we have the print statement here, a dummy print statement, so that it moves to the next line. It does not keep printing the same line. So once this has been run, it moves to the next row gets printed, and so on until the whole pattern gets printed. Okay, so let's modify this task a bit. So the obvious one, the next task would be, I wanted to write a program which prints the following triangle. It's usual practice that nested loops are used, programs are used for printing triangles here, and I want the height of the triangle must be taken as input. So the output would look something like this. I want you to ask the user the height of the triangle, so enter the height of the triangle, and let's say I enter 5, and the triangle that I want to be printed would look like this. So the height of this triangle is 5, so I want this kind of triangle to be printed. It's the same logic using same for loops and the same end is equal to program. You just need to modify the range component, change the range component a bit more, so that the first time it prints 1 asterisk, the second time it prints 2, the third time it prints 3. So that's all the logic that you need to think of to implement this program. I'll give you guys like 5 minutes, because all it needs is a bit of change in the previous program to print this. So your logic must be to think how you can print 1 the first time, 2 the second time, and 3 the third time, using this 5 here, using the input here. So I'll give you guys like 5 minutes to solve this. And if you probably solved it, try not to post it in 5 questions, so that the others also get a chance to solve it in the 5 minutes rather than looking at the solution. So if you've solved it, like, wait for it. In 5 minutes I'll be discussing the solution. Do not post it in 5 questions. Oh, it's the opposite. I think probably you would need to maybe switch the conditions that you did to reverse it. No, I don't think you have to take for j in range column, because all you need is a single input here, not 2 inputs. So you wouldn't take rows and columns, you would just take in the height. So yeah. So just declare a variable n and get the height here, take an input the height using, and needs a bit of thinking. Like, use your logic, you will probably get it. Okay, I guess we'll go with the solution for this one. Okay, cool. The first thing that you would want to do is get an input the height of the triangle from the user. So you would do that. So once the height has been given, we'll go by the same logic. Let's try to print the rows first and then the number of stars in each row, because it's much easier to print it this way rather than the opposite way. So we would need a single for loop which goes through each of these. So what this would do, the first time it would, so this would essentially give us 5 different rows, or n different rows depending on the input. So let's just assume that the input is 5, so it will give us 5 different rows. So we want to print 1 asterisk the first time, 2 the second. So you can't hard code it in this way, so you would probably need another loop. So to arrive at this conclusion, let's just think what the value of I is the first time. So the value of I the first time would be 1. I'm sorry, 0. The IF value the second time is 1. It goes to 2, it goes to 3. Let's just assume that n is equal to 5 in this case. So it would, I would take the value of 4, then the loop would terminate. So maybe we can use the I to print the stars. So maybe, the I increases 1 by 1. The stars also increase 1 by 1. So maybe we can modify the I a bit to print the number of stars in each line. So what we could do is, print the star I plus 1 number of times. So if I just print I, it's going to print it. The first time it's going to print 0 because I takes the value of 0, so it's not going to print anything. Second time it's going to print 1, the third time it's going to print 2. But we want at the first time itself for the asterisk to get printed once. So we would use I plus 1. So what this would do is the first time I is 0, so I plus 1 is 1. So the asterisk gets printed once. And the second time it's oh, sorry. Here. Okay. So the first time I is 0, but we increment it by 1. So it would essentially be asterisk multiplied by 1. So one time it gets printed. Then I plus 2 would be I plus 1, next time would be 2. So it gets printed twice, next thrice, 4 times and 5 times. So this is one way of doing it. But a much cleaner and simpler way of doing it would be using 2 different loops. So I'll just modify this program here. So instead of us hard coding using a print statement, we could just loop over this. We could just say, for j in range, we wanted to do the same thing. So this essentially would do the same thing here. So what it does is it prints from, it starts from the range of 0 to I plus 1. So first time it would just go through it once. The second time it would go through it twice because I plus 1 would be 2. So 0 and 2, 0 and 1. Third time it would be thrice, and the fourth time it would be 4 times. So all we need to do is use the same statement here. So if we do this, we can expect at the first time asterisk to be printed once, the second time to be printed twice. So printing this, it essentially prints in the same line. So again, to make them print in different lines, we would just add a dummy print statement here. That's it. So that's how the program works. So what it does, it makes sure is each time it goes to a different row. So j in this case, the first time j would take the value of let's just have a small let's just go through how the loop works. So first time I is 1, I is 0. So j could take the value of 0. That's it, because it can't take the value of it could take, okay, I'm sorry. So j takes 0, and I plus 1 is essentially 1. So j can only take the value of 0 here. So this gets printed only once. So if it gets to 1, the loop gets terminated. So next I gets the value of 1. So I plus 1 is essentially 2. So j could take the value of 0 here and 1. And the same thing for the next. I takes the value of 2. So the inner loop j would take the value of 0, 1 and 2, because I plus 2 is 3. So we would loop from 0, 1, 2 and 3. You can notice a pattern that I at the first time only takes 1, it takes 2 values and 3 values next time. So using the same logic is what we printed asterisks here. So when it takes the value of 1, a single asterisk gets printed. When it takes the value of when it takes 2 different values, 2 times it gets printed, and 3 and so on. So that's how the loop gets printed in this order. So I didn't initially plan this as a task, but to give you guys more practice, it's a simple thing. It's again a simple modification to the exact same program here. So I again want you to get an input, a height. So this time I just want the triangle to be printed in this way: 5 first, 4 next, 3, 2 and 1. So essentially the same thing but in reverse. So I'll give you guys like 2 minutes to solve this, because it's just a simple modification to the previous program to make sure it prints in the reverse order. So yeah. So to maybe give you a clue, all you need to do is to modify the parameter of the inner loop all you have to do is just modify this range here. So because you want the rows to remain the same, you just want the column to print 5 first, 4 next, and in the reverse order. So all you need to do is a simple modification to this statement here. You could do this two different ways. I'll maybe go through one of the ways you can do it. Okay, I'll give you guys another minute to solve this. Okay, let's see how we can do this. I'm just going to copy the same program here. So this program prints a single asterisk the first time, 2 the second time, and 3. So you want to do it in the reverse order. So you could use negative step value. You could maybe do this, but doing this would essentially print the same thing. So using negative step value is not going to give you a proper result in this case. So all you need to do is we need to modify again the value of using value of I and n, and let's just use that. So I, as you can see, takes the value of 0 the first time, 1 the next time, 2, 3, 4, so on. Let's just assume that n is equal to 5. So the first time we want to print 5 times. So an n is 5. So maybe we can, first time print n number of times, which is 5. So the first time maybe we can use n to print 5 times. But the next time we want to print 4. So maybe we can reduce this by 1 the next time. So the next time it prints only 4. And maybe the next time 3. And then maybe the next time 2, and so on. So we maybe use the value of n here to print 5 the first time, and maybe reduce it from that, because the first asterisk must contain the number of must contain the same number as the height of the triangle. So the height is 5. The first line must contain 5. If the height is 4, it might contain 4. So probably in that order. So to do that, what we would, a simple modification we would do this is use for j in range I comma n. So to explain how this logic works, let me just print this here to check if it works. So to explain the logic here is, I takes the value of 1 the first time, and assuming n is 5. So logic is, when I is 5, j can take the value of 1, because I'm sorry, I takes the value of 0 the first time. Sorry. So j can take the value of 0, can take the value of 1, 2, 3, 4, and not 5, because we put n as the final, as this end value of it. So the end value can never be taken. So it takes 0 and 5, which is essentially 5 values here. So we use that to print 5 times. Whereas the next time I becomes 1. So j can't take 0, because the start value is I. So the j can't take 1, it has to take 1. It can't take 0, it has to take 1. So because I is 1, j has to start from I, so j has to take the value of I, which is 1 in this case. So it would take 1, 2, 3, 4, it can't take 5 because n is 5. So this time we have 4 values. The next time I takes the value of 2, j can't start from 1 again, because I takes the value of 2, and the loop starts from the value of I. So j has to take 2 here, goes till 4, again 4 can't be taken, so there's 3 values here, and so on. So j at the next time would probably take 3 and 4, then it would take just 4, and the final time it would not have any value to take, so it would exit out of the loop. So 5 values, 5 asterisks, 4 value, 4 asterisks, 3 value, 3 asterisks, 2 and 1. So all we're doing is just modifying the way we use I and n and the order that we use to print this triangle. So all we did was to start from I end with n, so that the first time it gets printed 5, the next time when I increases, obviously j would only can hold 4 values, so 4 times, then the next 3 times, 2 times and so on. Okay, so there's one more way you could print the triangle. I'm not going to give this as a task. I'll probably solve it so that you see how this works. So we could print the triangle in this sense, which is a bit hard. There wouldn't be a space here, so like this. It's just the mirror image of this. I just want to print the triangle in the mirror image of this. So there's one tricky part about doing this, which is 2 loops would not be enough in this case, would probably not be ideal in this case. I'll tell you why. We need to have a loop for the number of rows. We need to have a loop to print the number of asterisks. But in this case, we need to have a loop for the number of spaces, because of the first time the space happens to be 4 here, the next time 3, 2 and 1. So we need to have a for loop which decreases the spaces each time, and we also need to have a for loop which increases the number of asterisks. So in this case we would probably need 3 different loops. So I'll go through how we can do it. What we'll do is we'll start with getting the input. So the first thing that you would probably do is go through each line, which is for I in range 0, n. Same thing as we did here, is to make sure we have 5 rows or the height is maintained. And so the first time, as you can notice, 4 spaces gets printed, and the last, instead of a space, an asterisk is printed. So essentially what it is doing is it's the same thing here, but 4 spaces followed by an asterisk, whereas 3 spaces followed by 2 asterisks here, 2 spaces to 3 asterisks and so on. So the space gets decreased. So the first time we want 4 spaces to be printed. So what we would do is we would kind of go by the same logic. We'll go by this. We'll start with this. We're just using the same command, but we're using the same thing to print spaces in this case. So we're just going to print space. So what this will do is it's just going to print a space here. But once this is done, once the space has been printed, we want a required number of asterisks to be printed. So we want at the first row 1 to be printed, 1 asterisk, the second time 2, and the third time 3. So we would take the logic from this loop here, because the first time it prints 1 asterisk, second time 2. So we would use the same for loop logic that we used here to use it here. So since we want to print, so we would say I plus 1 here. So the first time when I is 1, it gets printed once. The second time when I is 2, it gets printed twice, and so on. And we would still use end equal to here, because we want all this to be printed in the same line, the same exact line. So once all the printing of the spaces and asterisks is done, we're just going to give a print statement here. Could probably do this as well. Sorry. Yep. Okay. I'll walk you through this again and to make it much more clear. N is 5, so I takes the value of 0 the first time. So since we want 4 spaces to be printed and the final to be asterisk, we're using n minus 1. So n is 5, we want only 4 to be printed, so n minus 1 would probably give you 4. So j would take the value of 0, 1, 2, 3, because n minus 1 is equal to 4. So to take till 3. So 3 spaces will be printed in this case. Next we move to the k. K can take the value of 0, and that's it, because 0 plus 1 is I plus 1 is I maybe write it here to make it much more clear. So k takes the value of 0 here, so 1 asterisk is printed. Next time I takes the value of 1, so I plus 1 would essentially be 2 now, and n minus 1 would still remain 4. But j starts from I, so the value of I here is 1, so it goes from 1 to 2 to 3, and it stops with 3. So I'm sorry, 4 spaces here. Okay. 3 spaces now. And k can take the value of 0 now and 1, because I plus 1 is 2 now, so it can take the value of 0 and 1. So 2 stars. I'll just do it once more to make sure it's familiar to you guys. So I takes the value of 2 in this case. I plus 1 would be 3. And since j starts from the value of I here, j takes the value of, starts from 2, goes to 3, and that's it, it ends. So 2 spaces. And k can take the value of 0, 1, and 2 here, so 3 asterisks gets printed. The same logic is followed for the upcoming values of i's, j's, and k's. So it is or it might seem a bit difficult to print these patterns at the beginning, because you need to have a lot of different loops and you need to know what range to apply for this. But as you get used to it, you would probably get more comfortable with using nested for loops and different conditions based on it. If you ever get stuck, probably what you do is try going step by step. So what we probably did here was we tried when we started with this, we tried printing the rows first. We tried printing this, then we tried printing all the asterisks together. Then what we decided was we need all the asterisks to be printed in the same line, so we used the end command then. So then what happened was all the asterisks got printed in the same line. So but what we wanted was one to be printed in one line, then 2 asterisks. So then we realized that we needed to use another for loop here, which would print 1 asterisk the first time and 2 the second time. So when solving these kind of problems, take it step by step. Start with probably the number of rows, then work towards what you're printing and how you can segregate those printing. So then probably always remember that you can manipulate the values of I and probably the input that you get. So it's probably going to be manipulating the values of n and I in some way or some form, so that it fits your case of printing the triangle. So I'll end the concept of for loops for now. So you will get much practice in this week's homework. So this week's homework will give you enough practice for loops. So before ending the lecture, we'll look into something called dictionaries. And it's fine if you not feel comfortable with for loops. You would have a lot of exercises and problems coming up in the upcoming lecture, the upcoming homework. So as you solve that, you'll probably get much used to and much familiar with for loops and nested for loops. Okay, so moving on to dictionaries. So we've seen a lot of different data types, from integers to strings to lists to tuples. So dictionary is also one type of data type present in Python. So a dictionary in simple term would probably mean a collection of words with each of their meanings written in. So that's what basically a dictionary is. It contains different words and each word has their own meaning. So dictionaries in Python also work in a similar way. So dictionary in Python works in a concept with a key and a value. So how you can imagine is the key to be the word and value to be the definition of the word. So So let's say the key happens to be apple, and the value would probably be the definition of an apple, which would mean a fruit, or any definition that you find in a dictionary. So that's a simple concept in which Python dictionaries work. So let's just I'll declare a simple dictionary for you to understand. Let's declare a dictionary of the instructors maybe. So I'll be using this dictionary here. So for Golang, I think the instructor is Aditya in that case, and the instructor of MATLAB is Satya in front of me. Then, and the instructor of Python would be me, of course. So let me just type in here. Okay, so this is a set of dictionary where you have the language here and the instructor of that language respectively. So this is a sample dictionary here. So if we print the dictionary, it's just going to print the same thing here, okay? The same as list. And you probably print a list, it's going to print you the whole list and a tuple, the whole tuple. So how can we access the values in the list? So as I said, this is called a key, this is called a value, and all key value will have a semicolon between them. So the key, a semicolon, and the value, and this is the next key, the next semicolon, and the next value. So it's a collection of key and value pairs in the form of this is what a dictionary is, because you have the language and you have the lecturer for it. So it's basically the key and the definition or the value which you want to have under the key. So if I want to access or if I want to know who's the instructor for Golang, I would just say instructors. It's similar to list and tuple. You would just type in the key here. So using the key, you can retrieve the value. Sorry, I messed up the spelling, I think. So using the key, you can retrieve the value. So if I do this, it would mean, let's see, Python, it's going to return my name. And if I do the same thing for MATLAB, it's going to give Satya's name. Okay. So to access the values, all you have to do is to enter in the key in square brackets. It's the similar way as how you would use lists. In list, you would probably do list and index here. Instead of index, all you're doing is you're gonna take the dictionary, pass in the key. What this would do is this would return the value of the key. That's all this does. So this is these are the keys. Golang, MATLAB, Python are the keys and the values of the respective instructors of this. So if you want to retrieve all the keys, there's a simple command which is instructors.keys. This returns all the keys present in the dictionary. If you want all the lists present in the dictionary, you would say values. So using that would return all the values present. The keys are essentially the first part and the values are the second part. So using the dot keys method would return this, which is a collection of all the keys. So you would get it in a list format. This is essentially a list here. So you're getting it in list format, and printing dot values would essentially return a list of all the values present in it. So how do we maybe access them? Let's say I want to print in this way. Let's say the instructor for I want to print the language here is, and I want to print the instructor's name. So an easier thing would be using a for loop. So to all those who are to recap, printing this would print every single element in a for loop. I'm sorry. I'll think it probably used a somewhere else. Oh, sorry. Here. Cool. So what this would do is it would take each element in the list and print it. So there's a similar way you can print dictionaries. So instead of this, if I use for I in instructors, which you've declared, I'll just copy it and paste it here so that you guys can see. Okay. If I do this and try to print, it's going to print the keys. It's not going to print the values. So whenever you use for I in a dictionary, it's always going to give you the keys and not the values. Whereas in list, it gives you each and every element of the list. In tuple, it's going to give you each and every element of the tuple. Whereas in string, it's going to return each and every character, as you've noticed. But in case of dictionaries, it's going to return each and every key present in the dictionary. So what if we want to access the values? Simple as it is, you would just print instructors. We have the key now. I is basically the key. So here we passed in the key in form of a string. We can just pass in I, because I is essentially, this is essentially saying instructors, and if the first happens to be Golang, is essentially saying this. Instead we're just using I, and I changes every single time. So using this would print their respective things here. So to put forth this in a single line, I would say, keep messing up spelling, for I, because I is the key, and the key is essentially the language here, is, and I want the value using this key. So how retrieving the value using the key is, first you type in the dictionary and you type in the value, you type in the key, this is going to return the value. So there you go. So I gets the key, so the key is printed. The keys are languages here. So using the key, we retrieve the values from the dictionary, and the values are basically the lecturers for each of the language. So using this, we print in a for loop the key and the value. So this is how you access keys and values in a for loop, because I wanted to illustrate this because it works in a different way compared to lists and tuples. So okay, so there might be a question you might ask, what if I have two similar keys? So let me just declare another dictionary here. It's let's take an animal count. So probable estimate of the number of lines in the word, let's take it to be 15,000 here. Let's take tigers here. Tigers would probably be, I think, 3,900 is the number of tigers in the world. It's pretty less compared to lions, but yeah. So let's have another key which also is lion, and it's just that I give a different value. Instead of 15,000, I give 13,000 here. So what if I access lion using the value of lion using the key? So if I do this, what would happen? I have two lines here, two keys with two exactly similar keys with different values. So passing in a key, what would happen? So what happens with Python is it returns the last occurrence of line and it prints the value of that. So maybe if I add another tigers here and say 3,000, printing the animal count of the tigers would print the last one. So if you have two similar keys, and when you try to access the key or access the value using the key, it's going to take the last occurrence of it. It's going to see from reverse, check if this is a line. No, it's not a line. It's going to check if this key is line, it's going to print this. It's not going to print the first occurrence, it's going to print the last occurrence. That's how Python works. So if you have similar keys with different values and you try to access those values, it's going to retrieve you the value of the last occurrence of the key. It's not going to retrieve the first occurrence, it's going to be the last occurrence. So that's what happens if you have similar keys in a dictionary. Okay, so Another question might arise. I want to modify a dictionary. So let me just take in a let me just declare a new dictionary. And we have 31 days in January, and by mistake, I typed number of days in February will be 30, and it actually is, since this is a leap year, it's 29 instead of 30. So, and I missed March, and instead of March I typed April, let's say. Okay, so now I want to modify the number of days the February has. It's actually not 30, it is 29. So it's the same way as how you would modify a list. So if I had a list here of this, if I wanted to modify 3 to 4, I would say a of 2, I put in the index and say make it 10. So printing this would change this to 10. So since we can't use indexes for dictionary and instead we use keys, the simple thing would be to access the key or access the value of the key and change that to 28 or 29 in this case. And if I print months now, it's going to change the value and print. This is modifying a list dictionary. What if I want to add a value to a dictionary? So if I want to add a new entry, or say append a new entry to the end, I would say months, and I would declare something new called March, and I would give in equal to and give in 31. So what this would do is add March to the end of it. So there's one problem with dictionaries. You can't exactly add the key that you want in an exact spot. You can only append a value to the end. That's what you can probably do. That's one problem with the dictionaries in Python. So using this command would you can't use that. Using this command you can't add an entry in between. All you can do is add it to the end. That's all the thing that you can do. So if it was probably a list, you could use dot insert and so on, but with this command all you can do is add an entry to the end. That's what this command would probably do. So similar to lists and tuples, you have various other functions that you can use on a dictionary. For example, you have the length function, or the length functions, which returns the length of the dictionary. As you can see, the length is 4 because we've changed it. It's 4 now. And you also have the delete function, similar to how it was used in the list. So if I say delete, I want to delete months, and let's say I want to delete the entry of March, I would just type in March. This would delete the entry of March. So printing months now would print it without March here. So this is deleting an entry. This is length of the dictionary here. And you can do another thing. In list you add the pop command. If you've noticed, and if you remember, you have the pop command. The pop command, what it does, it removes an entry and stores it in a variable. So let's say I want to store in A the values of maybe the number of days that January has. So I would say months dot pop, and I would type in January here. So printing in pop would be printing in A oh, I'm sorry, I modified the list. So cool. So if I use the pop January command, it pops the value of January and stores it in A. So now if I print months, it's going to print without it's going to say January does not exist because since I've removed it, I'm using the same dictionary here, that's why this error pops up. Let me just declare a new dictionary here since I'm using the same dictionary. Okay, so okay, you can see that January has been popped off. The value of January has been saved to A. So A gets the value under the key January, and once you print months, you can see January has been popped off, so January is there no more. And to delete a list, so delete a dictionary in this case, you used to use del function. So to delete a list out of existence, you would use del months, and this would have deleted the dictionary. So if I try to print months now, it's going to say the name month is not defined because I've deleted the dictionary from the memory itself. So months does not exist anymore. So that's the delete command. I do understand it's a lot of commands for dictionary now. So I'll maybe have a short, I'll go through the commands in short so that you guys have it as a revision. So dictionary is essentially a new data type which takes in a key and takes in a value. So it's a collection of key and value pairs. So to retrieve a value using the key, you would use the instructor, you would type in the name of the dictionary, pass in the key, and that would return the value of the key. And to return all the values or all the keys, you would use the dot keys method, which would return a list of all the keys. The dot values method would return a list of all the values. To the for loop in using a dictionary would essentially return you the key. So giving for I in instructors would return you the key and not the value. So to access the value, simple thing that you would do is pass in the key and you would get in the value. And to modify a dictionary or to modify an existing value, you would pass in the key of the value that you want to modify and type in a new value. This would essentially modify an existing value. To add a new entry, you would simply put in a new key here and add a new value. This would essentially append the new value and key to the end of the dictionary. And finally, the length command returns the length of the dictionary. The pop command pops off this certain element and stores it in a variable. So and that element is also no more. A simple difference between the pop command and the delete command is the pop command returns you the value, whereas the delete command just deletes the list as a whole. You could also use this. So using this would delete just this key and not the whole list. To delete the whole list, you would just have to enter delete months and this would delete the whole list. Okay, so we saw Unicode at the beginning of the lecture. We moved through, we solved a few problems on nested for loops here. Then we saw a new data type called dictionaries and saw how to use them. So there's a lot more methods applicable to dictionaries. You can always check them out at Python documentation. So all you have to do is type in Python documentation in Google and you would get the documentation. So using that, you could learn about a lot of different methods that you have for dictionaries and how they're used. So your homework would involve both nested loops and dictionaries and also a bit of Unicode here. So if this seems overwhelming for you, doing the homework would make you feel a bit more comfortable with the concepts. So the homework would be uploaded in 2 to 3 days. So hopefully you guys have fun in solving the homeworks, and that would give you a sense of a better idea regarding nested loops and dictionaries. So next lecture we would be going through while loops, which is a different type of loop, and maybe a bit more programs on for loops if you guys are still not comfortable with it. So that's it for lecture 5 of Python, and if you guys have any questions, you can ask them in PyQuestions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. So thank you guys, and okay, maybe I'll just wait for a few more minutes to see you guys have any